Ben Judah. That might be the most Jewish name ever. But the only way you can get more to the Jewish than that is to be like Juicy Shoe. Juicy Shoe. Let's run with that. There's your comic skit. Keep it clean. Okay, so um, I'm just about to conclude that Mr. Shearhever is indeed working for someone. Um, I'm not totally there yet, and I gotta be careful because I don't want a lawsuit, but I would be thinking that that seems to be the case. I just watched a few videos on ISIS. Um, let's not really bother talking about where ISIS came from because this is a narrative. It's a narrative presented to us by uh, questionable sources, and we don't have a counter narrative, and it doesn't really matter where it came from. What matters is that it's there and what it wants to do. Um, I mean, the story that we're given about ISIS, it comes off as a founder myth, and that's fine. But you have to be skeptical with these sorts of things. When history starts looking like a story, is the point where you need to be a little bit skeptical. Um, so let's ignore that part. Instead, let's look at the actual, you know, the political situation. So he's presenting the argument here that the administration in the United States was being dragged into war by angry public opinion that wanted retribution for the beheadings that we saw on TV. So this is not a situation where, the government is bringing people to war. It's a situation where the people are forcing the government to go to war. He suggests that ISIS is not a threat to the United States, and therefore America should not become involved. Instead, America should sit back and wait for the regional countries to take the lead themselves. See, this is interesting to me because my analysis of the situation is certainly not that the people are dragging the government to war to begin with. That's an incredibly see. I don't want. I think you would basically have to have grown up in Israel to have that perception of people. I mean, I don't. I mean, where else in the world could you have grown up to have the perception that war is brought on by popular consensus and the government is? I mean, I can't even fathom that understanding of human beings. Um, let me just state the obvious, as somebody that lives in North America, that there has not been a push for war by the population. There have been anti-war demonstrations, and the idea of a war in Syria is exceedingly unpopular, as the other wars were in the region. This idea that Americans want a war in Syria is so disconnected from reality that it's hard to get your head around it. In fact, number one, you had the House of Representatives fighting against it. David Cameron lost a vote in his house. But I mean, it was the Russians. I mean, that's the generally understood perception of things is that the Russians said this is going to cause a huge war. Um, you know, I think everybody realized at the time that we were tumbling towards World War III, but the Russians really stood up and said, "Okay, if you do this, it is World War III." So, and it's widely understood that that's the reason why it didn't happen. Um, so it seems clear to, I think, everybody that the administration wanted a war here, was pushing hard for one, and was pulled back by outside forces. So again, I don't know how you construct this other perspective of things, other than if you're being fed information to promote some kind of a media narrative, or you're exceedingly naive. But there's only a certain point of naivety that is acceptable. At some point, you have to say, okay, this is obvious disinformation. Um, and he's suggesting that America should do nothing, that the bombing campaign can serve no purpose, and that they should allow the countries to fight with. What was he say? He thinks they would unite to fight a common threat. See, my analysis is that the reason that the Americans have been funding ISIS is because they're trying to inflame conflict in the region. It's a divide and conquer strategy. And so what they want is for the Turks and the Saudis and the Iranians to be fighting with each other, because that makes all of them weaker, right? So, I mean, that's my reading of the situation, and I think it's a pretty clear reading. Um, if you look at the kinds of things that they're doing, I mean, they're going after Assad. It's an American objective. They probably would have at least succeeded in, well, let me rephrase this. They have at least succeeded in switching the government in Iraq. Um, and it seems to all be very, very, very clearly aligned, mostly with Saudi goals. Although you've also got Turk goals there too, right? And Iranian goals. So, well, the Iranians are with the Syrians, and to a lesser extent with the Iraqis, right? So what you have happening in the region is not. I mean, the premise of the Turks and Saudis and Iranians working together to fight ISIS seems so divorced from what we know about what's happening on the ground, which is that the Turks and Saudis and Iranians are all fighting each other through proxy conflicts. One's supporting al-Nusra, and another one's supporting ISIS, and another one's supporting Assad, and it's this multi sided conflict that's developed. It's what's happening there, right? So I don't know how to square any of this other. I mean, there's always a possibility of extreme naivety, but in this particular circumstance, I think that the evidence is leaning very strongly towards disinformation. So we share, but I'm calling you on this bullshit.